Hello, everybody, and welcome to the fourth installment of our series of webinars around chatbots. I'm your host for today, Geert Baeke, CTO at Xylos, where my main focus is on cloud applications or modernizing applications using cloud technologies and AI. We'll spend about 15 minutes during this webinar. And if you have questions, feel free to ask these questions via GoToMeeting or drop me an email afterwards as well. Today we'll look at a bit more in-depth exploration of chatbots. Yeah. First of all, let's take a look at all the components which are part of a chatbot. And in essence, really when you're creating a chatbot, you are writing code. And the code you write will hold the conversational and business logic. Conversational logic just means that you will have to have dialogues with your end users, and those have to be coded in a specific way. And business logic, as usual, your bot has to do something. So for example, if you're writing a room reservation bot, you will have to connect back to systems which provide room availability. Now, the bot that you write is made available over the internet as a REST endpoint. So you're basically creating an API, and the channels are connecting to this API. That's something that Frederick in previous webinars also explained, that you can access your bot through different channels, like for example, a web chat channel, but also Skype or Teams, for instance. Now, luckily, you're not on your own when you're writing your bot in code. You can use all kinds of services to enhance your bot any which way you want. For example, platform services like Bing APIs, for instance, to do spell checking or to do searches in documents. Intelligence tools, and in a moment you'll see an example of a bot which is using the language understanding and intelligence service. And that allows us to do natural language understanding in our bot. And then you have the Bot Builder SDK, and that one is available for two languages. You can actually write your bot using Node.js, so JavaScript, or if you're of course using .NET, you can do so as well. You would typically then write your bot using C#. Now, let's take a look at how we then at Xylos create these bots. We are using the Azure Bot Service for this. And here you see a screenshot of the Azure Bot Service, or an instance of an Azure Bot Service, as you can see it from the Azure portal. Now, why do you create it using the Azure Bot Service? Because there are other ways to create a bot as well. Well, first of all, it is quicker to get started. And if you're a beginning developer, it also provides all sorts of templates that you can start with. Now, we typically don't use these templates. We have our own templates, which have some other more advanced scenarios. But if you're starting out, it's really a great help that you can do it this way. And then the Azure Bot Service also provides the surrounding plumbing, so to speak, that make using your bot or seeing how effective your bot is also more interesting. And you see the analytics screen here in front of you, where you can see the amount of users per channel, for instance, or the amount of messages per channel. And you don't really have to do anything for that. Now, let's take a look at how you actually create a bot. And maybe before I get started with the bot that I'm going to show you can also be connected to your Skype if you would like to. One of my colleagues will actually put the URL in the chat box, so you can click on that and connect it to Skype. Not Skype for Business, but the consumer version of Skype. And don't worry, you don't have to do it during the seminar. If you would like to follow along and not spend time on configuring the bot in Skype, you can also do it afterwards. The bot will still be available when this session ends. Now let's look at the bot that we have created for this session to provide a bit more in-depth information about it. Well, first of all, as I said, we are creating a bot using Azure, and you would do so with the Azure portal. You can actually start creating a new bot. That would be in the AI and cognitive services section And there, for example, you can create a web app bot. That just means that the bot, the API that you're going to create, will live in an Azure web app. Yeah. To create such a bot, as always with the Azure portal, you have to provide information about the name of the bot, of course, where is your bot located, so in which region do you like the bot to work, and depending on where, like say, most of your users are, and also a pricing tier. You have a free pricing tier, but also a pricing tier if you expect much more messages to be exchanged with your users. And as I said, for beginning developers, if you're starting coding your first bots, you can just select the language and then a template, and the Azure Bot Service will get you started with a code sample, so you can start right away with this. Now, I already created a bot for this session, and this bot is called Xylos. So it's a bot that uses the language understanding and intelligence service. And when I click on that bot, it will be opened up in the portal. And maybe first, to give you a feel of what the bot is actually doing, I will test it in web chat. So right from the portal, you can test your bot within this screen. Now, this bot is a very simple bot. I kept it deliberately simple so that you have a clear example to work with. This bot, I can ask information about a sensor, so a small IoT device, and I can ask for temperature and humidity in this room. Yeah, now it's a Dutch bot we created, just to show you also that the Dutch language is supported, just as the French language is supported. It doesn't always have to be an English language bot that you create using the Azure Bot Service. Let's take a look and ask how many degrees it is here. So hoeveel graden is it? Let's ask for this and see what the bot is answering. You can see here, well, right at this moment, it's 25.5 degrees Celsius. You also can see here that we are responding using an adaptive card, so we don't respond just with text. And it's important that you can provide a nice user interface and a nice user experience to your users. And with adaptive cards, we can do just that. Now, also take a look that we can actually type errors here. And sometimes you can see, okay, I'm typing here temperature, I make a mistake. If I'm asking, for example, for the humidity, and I type a wrong answer, or I type a wrong question, you can see that in most cases, in some cases, you can actually translate it for us in the correct, or correct the question that we have typed here. And we're using here the Bing APIs for that. So that's one of those platform services that we discussed that you can use to improve the effectiveness of your bot. Now, we discussed channels already in previous webinars. The channels can be added from within Azure Bot Service. As you can see, the Skype channel was added. And if I start Skype, in this case, the Windows 10 version of Skype, you see it here. I have the bot, it's called Metingen or Measurements. And when I type a message here, and I'm asking for example, hoe warm is het? Well, in that case, I will also get an answer using Skype in this case. And there we have it. And the adaptive card is also rendered here. Now, be aware that these adaptive cards might not be rendered in all channels. So part of our job, and also talking with our customers, is to see what kind of channels do you want to enable, and then make sure that the user experience is correct across all of these channels. And that's quite some work you have to do to get it just right if you're using a multitude of channels versus when you're only building a bot for one channel, say a Facebook Messenger bot, for instance. So that's how the bot works. So you have a feel for what the user experience is. That's the only thing you can do. You cannot ask further questions here to our bot. Now let's go and look at the code a bit. Azure Bot Service provides a code editor right in the web interface. Typically, we don't use this if we're going to do offline development with source control and so on. But for this simple example, we can use it here. And we won't go through a full code review, just a couple of things we need to discuss. First of all, Lewis. We are using the language understanding and intelligence service that Microsoft provides for natural language understanding. Of course, our bot needs to connect to this Lewis application. And you see some code around that so it can connect to Lewis properly. What I also do when I call Lewis, you can see it here, I'm actually setting spell checking to true. And that's, you saw that spell checking is active in the bot here. Lewis provides support for spell checking out of the box, and we use in that case the Bing APIs for that. And now we have the dialogue. As I said earlier, we have to have conversational logic in our bot. The conversational logic is here. So we're building, as you can see here, we're building a dialogue with the user, and we're using the Lewis recognizer that we set up earlier. Yeah. And the important thing is that we like to match the intent of the user. I'd like to know what the user is doing. So the Lewis service will take the question of the user, will then apply or use the machine learning model that we trained to guess what the intent of the user is. And in this case, we have an intent, it's called mating, measurement. So in the code, I can then see, well, if the user is asking for a measurement, let's do something. And in this case, we use a simple API that connects to our backend system to get the temperature and humidity data. And then also we take a look what kind of things the user asked for, what kind of entities are in the question. So we take a look at, okay, is there an entity about temperature? If the user is typing graden or degrees, that's a temperature question. So in the code, I can see, well, actually the user asked something about temperature. And then depending on that, what we detect, we will actually send a message to the user. The message is here, and we use an adaptive card that we have created. So that's all for the code. So quite a simple bot in this case, but it shows a bit what you have to do when it comes to conversational logic and business logic that you put inside your bot. But of course, a very important thing is the natural language understanding. So let's go to Lewis, and I'll sign in. Yeah, it signed me out, so hopefully I can sign in quite quickly here. The Lewis app that we created was created for the Dutch language. You can see that here. The app is called Metingen, and the culture is set to Dutch, right? Let's click on this, and you'll see how this now matches with what we did in the code. In the code, we were looking for an intent, and we were also looking for entities that the user was typing. So naturally, we have to do this. We have to build these intents within Lewis. You can see the intent here, mating, that corresponds with what you saw in the code of the bot. And there you also see the entities that we configured, humidity and temperature, corresponds to what we also did in the code. Now, the main importance here is that when you create intents, you provide examples to Lewis that are then used to train a machine learning model without you having to be a machine learning expert. So you give it about a couple of examples. It says 5, but of course you can give more. But a big difference with, for example, other machine learning models like, let's say, deep learning, for instance, you have a lot of training examples that you need to provide. With this kind of system, a couple of examples usually are sufficient to train the bot. For example, I gave here all kinds of questions like how warm is it, how warm is it? And then I also tell the system, well, warm actually means temperature. Yeah, so I map the entities to specific words or combinations of words in the utterances, what the user is saying right away. So I would type extra sentences there. When I'm finished, I would just train the model again. Now, in this case, nothing has to be done, but training is a very quick process. And luckily, when I have trained my model, I don't have to publish the model right away to my bot to test it. I can test it right away. For example, if I'm saying again here, how warm is it, but in Dutch, hoe warm is it? Well, as you can see here, he has 96% certainty that it's the intent measurement, And if I inspect what Lewis has done, he actually also finds that, well, the word warm that I used maps to an entity, which is temperature, right? So that's basically how it works. Again, here this is a simple model. So when you have a more complicated bot where a user can ask many more questions, you will of course have many more intents, many more entities, and it all comes down to then how you train and refine the model afterwards to get your bot just right. Of course, we help our customers with, okay, how do you train that bot? Also, when we have left the project, you can still add, for example, extra utterances or make some tweaks here and there so that you get your bot right and the user experience is how you want it to be. Now, one thing you should not forget, when our training is done, of course, I have to publish my app again. So the Lewis app has to be published. When I publish it to a production slot, yeah, my bot can then again use the trained model right from, yeah, in this case, web chat or any of the other channels that were configured with the system. Yeah, so that provides, let's say, a basic overview, a bit more in depth about how we create bots using the Azure Bot Service and then all the services around it to get the user experience just right. So I hope you enjoyed this session. So thanks a lot for your attendance. And again, if you have questions, do not hesitate to drop us a line and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. See you again another time. Bye bye.